Hello, friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Before we take you to your favorite Sports History Network show, just want to tell you a little bit about some merch that you can pick up that represents your favorite SHN podcast. So far, there's t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even books from some of the authors that do podcasts right here on SHN. Who could buy something better than that, than have the history right from the gentleman that you hear talking about it? But we also are adding things each and every day. And where's that store, may you ask? Well, it's at SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Up at the top, there is the SHN merch button. Click on that. It'll take you right to the store, and you can be representing your favorite podcast and show the world that, hey, on the swag that I'm using, it's the headquarters of sports yesteryear, Sports History Network, and my favorite podcaster, the Sports History Network store. Shop there today. We're heading out to the Pacific Coast today to catch a wave and some great sports history with Dan Cisco, author of the book California Sports Astounding. And it is astounding with some great history and some great talk with a great author. Dan Cisco's in the pig pen talking his book and California sports here in just a moment. This is a Sports Jersey Dispatch podcast, an audio designed in the preserving of sports history by the uniforms, jerseys, and sweaters worn, as well as the iconic players that made them legendary. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of sports through the gear that the participants wore. In other words, a dispatch of sports history through jerseys. Hello, my sports friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com and JerseyDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to all things good in sports history. And we really have a treat for you today in this episode because we have a guest that's wrote a book on California sports history in a very unique and entertaining way. His name is Dan Cisco, and we will welcome him in now. Dan, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Hey, thanks a lot, Darren. I appreciate it. I'm way out here in California, and I just finished a new book. It's actually called California Sports Astounding, and it's a history of sports in California from statehood till now. And I tried. Maybe I was a bit foolish about this, but I did include 65 sports. And there's probably another 20 or 30 I didn't even get around to. But the main thing was to preserve the history, have fun with it. And it's got the Olympics and high school, college, pro. It's got a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Well, okay, you just probably stymied me and the audience. We're all taking our shoes off to count up, trying to come up with 65 different sports and more than 65. So this should be interesting. I can't wait to get into this a little bit here. Now, you said you started from statehood of California till now. So what year did California become a state? Just for our little history lesson here.
It was 1850, and I had to look at periodicals, newspapers from that era, and to see when they mentioned recreation, amusements, sports, things like that. So I was really trying to find the first appearance of each of these sports. When did they make a debut in California, and where? And California is so large. I mean, I had to get my map out and work with it side by side. But that was kind of the goal, because it's too complex to tackle pre-statehood California. That's way out there. But I thought this might be of value. I think every state should have a sports book. Pennsylvania, New Jersey. How did it all start? And, you've got a lot of people there that would be interested in that. So this is just a small contribution to American sports history. And that's how it got going.
Well, we certainly love the preservation of sports history. That's what we're all about, and that's what the listeners love and what they enjoy too. So we really appreciate it, and we're going to appreciate this conversation. So I guess maybe to kick us off here, maybe we can talk a little bit about you. What happened in your life to get you interested in sports to the point of writing a book about California sports?
Oh, boy. I was a sports fan from being a little kid, like from day one. I would read the sports section and throw out the rest of the newspaper. I was reading the sporting news, I don't know, at the age of 7 or 8, whatever. So I was a sports fan from day one, and I've always enjoyed watching it and participating in it. in it. And it kind of went from there. My career was as a librarian for the federal government. So I kind of meshed those two things. I love doing research. I love finding out new things and preserving history. So I brought in that librarianship and that sports interest together. And that's what kind of enabled me to pull off the project. Of course, this is the work of a lot of people, but my name's on there on the front, and thankfully I had a great supporting cast. So.
Well, yeah, I can tell because you've had a lot of great work in here, and your acknowledgement page is outstanding. You really talk about a lot of folks there that you're willing to thank, and I know from contact with your publicist who got us in touch here and sent us a copy of your book, and we're thankful for that too, to set us up to help have an educated conversation with you about it. And it's really interesting, and especially it's really unique the way you set it up. And just for the readers, Dan has set it up not so much chronologically, but it's by date of the year, and he goes, takes you all over the history timeline by starting in January and working your way towards the back. Now, how did you come up with that concept of setting up the book?
Well, initially I wanted to, just do a 365-day entry. And then, of course, I was like, okay, let's get realistic. It's way too big, way too complicated. So I just decided to tackle each month and see what each month had to offer. And if it was March, then I went into March and just tried to find, well, what sports were happening at that time? Which sports? And there's a lot of minor sports which had never been documented before. And how did they start? And they might have popped up in March, or it could have been in August. So I just tried to tackle it that way. And each month was kind of fun to do because it was like, wow, what's around the corner here? And again, California has such a long history of so many great venues and personalities and people, and they're all kind of just scattered in the book. But the good thing is, and we were able to really chronicle a lot of different minor sports and give them credit, because again, the minor sports tend to be minor simply because they're held back. They may not have the financial support, but not only that, it's the history. They don't have an established history that the media can recognize and say, hey, like pickleball. I mean, pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the country. Oh, well, yeah. Guess where the national championships are held? Well, they're held in California. And so that's an example of, okay, a sport that originated in the state of Washington, made its way to California, and now look at it. I mean, it's crazy in a good way. I mean, it's fantastic how that sport has developed and grown, and a lot of people enjoy it. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad you mentioned pickleball, because we're going back to that question of you saying the 65 sports, and we're all sitting there saying, okay, we know football and baseball and basketball and hockey, soccer, some tennis, some boxing. What are some more of the unique sports that you talk about in the book?
Well, as an example, the sport of triathlon was invented in California. Now, the world's first triathlon was held in France, but America's first triathlon was staged in San Diego, California. So that alone, you see how that has grown to be a worldwide phenomenon. So you have sports that are, all these cyclists, and then the runners got together and the swimmers got together, and then they decided to make an event And it was crazy. So they just put on this event, not really knowing what they were doing. I mean, it was primitive. It was nothing like the way it is now with the media coverage and the medical personnel every mile and, all the safeguards in there. So that, that was a really good example of that. I got a question for you. Every state, or most of them at least, have an official state sport. Now, what do you think California's official state sport is?
Boy, if I was going to guess, first thing that comes to my mind when I think of California would be like beach volleyball.
Well, you're close. You're on the beach. You're really close. It has to do with water.
Surfing?
You got it. Hey!
Is it? Okay. Hey. All right. Yeah, I can get that. I got the Beach Boy vibe going here. So
the interesting thing was that surfing and beach volleyball came from Hawaii, of course. That was the birthplace of the sport. But it was introduced in Santa Cruz, California, Northern California. And some Hawaiian princes were on vacation in Santa Cruz. And they decided to go out for a little adventure on the waves. And that was the very first time surfing was, introduced, was spotted, was recorded in the state of California. So it's got a long history. And then beach volleyball came later. Beach volleyball made its way from Hawaii to Southern California, specifically Santa Monica, suburb of Los Angeles, close to LA. But beach volleyball came and was introduced there and then just spread like crazy throughout the state. And of course, now America's greatest volleyball players, California dominates in a sport like beach volleyball, water polo, things like that.
Yeah, interesting. Now, I sat there and I was looking at the map of California on your book here, and it came to my realization as we're talking, California is probably unique in a way that it is a state is so long and so long north and south that it's got sort of every climate that you could have. More than any other state I can think of. You got the sunny beaches of Southern California up to the mountains and great snowstorms. So that probably allows for a wide array of sports and sports history. You probably have some things about skiing, and I've seen in there. And
exactly. The winter sports. We have snowboarding, and then we have skiing. And so a lot of that's all included in the book. Just an interesting history because you're right. I mean, you got the Sierra Nevada mountain range. You got world-class skiing right there. Yet you have distance runners that go to the Sierra Nevada and train at altitude. And some of the America's runners train up there year round. So, that gives us an amazing, California is amazing that way because you can live in a place like San Diego where I'm at, and I can be in the beach. I could be at the beach in maybe 10, 15 minutes. If I go east, I've got desert. So you've got all that hiking and mountaineering, Mount Whitney, of course, up further north. But in San Diego, I've got Mexico, 15 minutes away. I've got Los Angeles, 2 hours away. So I've got mountains, beach, desert, and everything in between. So yes, it lends itself to that year-round participation in sports. On a cold day when it gets below 60, okay, we'll watch sports. But basically, we're like Hawaii. You can participate. You can practice your sport year round, which is amazing. It just allows a different dimension to sports. We're not limited to the poor guy who lives in a northern state, let's say, it might be restricted due to severe weather and cannot do a lot of these sports. One example is the state sport of surfing. That's great if you live along the coast, but there's more people that actually skateboard in California. So there was a big push in the state legislature to make skateboarding the official state sport. However, surfing prevailed, and I'm kind of glad it did. But when you talk to people in the Central Valley, you talk to people in the eastern parts of California, those people skateboard. They're not close enough to go to the beach. It would be a several hour. I mean, not everyone can get to the beach, but it's just interesting. So we have something, skateboarding and surfing. You can see how they're related. They're board sports. They're
probably snowboarding thrown in there too, that you talked about earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but another sport that came up that was invented here was the go-kart racing. And that occurred in the parking lot of the Rose Bowl football stadium in Pasadena. So they invented the go-kart, number one, and that's where they started testing it and started driving it and trying to make it work. So a lot of interesting minor sports or smaller sports, let's say. And then, we've got our arm wrestlers here. Arm wrestling is popular here, just like a lot of other places. So, yeah, I could give you an alphabetical list, but it might take too long. I mean, a list of all 65. There's quite a few. So
put quite a wide array that you've set for us there. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad you wrote about them. When you do your research on something like this, I do research all the time. And sometimes you read some things which you expect to find. And sometimes you have those aha moments or those bits of information. It just slap you in the head and say, oh my gosh, that happened. What was sort of the wow factor piece that you found during your research on this book?
Oh boy, there was quite a few, but I do remember reading about Native Americans in California and some of the tribes and groups in the southern part of the state. And evidently, they were the ones, let's put it this way. It was the earliest occurrence I could find for the sport of football. And it was 1854, only 4 years after statehood. And there was an article that I stumbled upon. I mean, I was just in that area of my research, and there was some military members who had traveled throughout that area, that valley, Tejon Pass, and they reported back that there was some recreational activity going on, and that the Indians had a favorite sport, and that was football. That was actually reported in the California press as the one thing that gave them a lot of enjoyment was this sport. Now, keep in mind this is 4 years after statehood. The University of California, Berkeley didn't even introduce football. I mean, a football program where they're actually playing games. That was not until 1886.
Yeah, well, the game of American football, Walter Camp didn't even really create it till 1880. So right, there was football before, so we had soccer and rugby prior to that. So they're probably playing a form of that being called football.
Yeah, so they used the word football in the article, and you're right. It could very well just be a variance of rugby or some other thing. But it was just interesting that I was so happy to get that, because I wanted to record some of our Native Americans' contributions to sports in California. And so that just popped in there, and that was kind of a neat little thing. But yeah, the colleges didn't get going till much later. I mean, USC Trojans came 2 years after Cal. The Trojans didn't start their football program till after. So when those college programs were starting, they were playing high schools or they were playing community teams. It was just, they would play whoever was around. But to give you a brief timeline, it was UC Berkeley in 1886, USC Trojans 2 years later, and then Stanford with 1891, and then UCLA came along much later at the year 1919. But it just gradually took hold. And again, the state is so big, there could have been small pockets of it, and it may not have been documented that well. So again, I looked at several books trying to find any mention of any recreation or sports or leisure activities from 1850 on. And again, there's probably a lot more out there. That's what I like about this subject. I can easily add several more books on it and just flesh it out and fill in those gaps or add more information to make it more complete. And that'll be good. It'll be good for historians and fans and give everyone a starting point. So if anyone wants to join me, this is a big subject. There's plenty of room for everybody. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, you talk about the football. Now, we just got done in November and December. We did 40 straight days of Rose Bowl history in celebration of the Rose Bowl's 100th anniversary of the stadium. Of course, there's more Rose Bowls than that, but just really got a good glimpse of because for a while there it was a West Coast team against an Eastern team, and then evolved into the Big Ten, and now it's been sort of morphed into the championship series and everything. But we got to learn a lot about the Stanfords and Cals and USCs in their early goings, along with some of the others like the Occidentals and St. Mary's and some of those teams from football past that was really interesting, and the Rose Bowl really learned a lot. Now, we were trying to come up with all kinds of great factoids on the Rose Bowl, but your go-kart one is one that I missed. I didn't realize that happened because we were trying to find anything that would come with the stadium. So maybe we'll have to include that next year when we add on to that. So appreciate that. We'll give you the credit in the book. So you talk a lot about. We've talked about football. We've talked about some of the other sports. We can't go away without mentioning the great basketball tradition, especially in Southern California, and especially at one school in particular. And I know you've got a couple excerpts about that and a legendary coach there.
That's right. The UCLA basketball program, of course, for many years were dominating the just college sports. They were just so big and so far ahead of everyone at that time. The sport itself made its debut actually in Berkeley. That was the first recorded game that we know of, and it was girls basketball.
Okay.
So that got pretty rough, evidently, according to the article. But anyway, basketball, such a rich history because San Diego, our contribution, was, Bill Walton. Okay. Well, the Hall of Famer and all of his accomplishments. But if you go up north, Bill Russell, even though he was born in Louisiana, he came out to California, for his college time and University of San Francisco. And then he led them to the NCAA title. And not only that, he was a world-class high jumper. So a lot of people don't know that. He almost chose track over basketball. So he had quite a career. And his teammate at University of San Francisco was Casey Jones. And of course, they got reunited in their pro career as members of the Boston Celtics. And of course, he won all those NBA titles too. So basketball, it's crazy here. We've got every league. We got the developmental league, for the NBA. You've got high school players that are just off the charts, good. But again, we have 40 million people. We have 10% or more of the nation's population. So it makes sense that we're going to have a few more elite athletes.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, Dan, let's talk about, you told us the title of the book, California Sports Astounding. And before we go any further, let's make sure that people know where they can purchase a copy of your book at. Maybe you could give them some avenues for that.
Okay, shameless plug here. Okay.
Okay.
It is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I also have a website, which is California Sports Astounding.com. And it's a real detailed website with a lot of background on the book and just sports in general. So people might enjoy looking at that. But definitely, and it's something, if they're interested in what a lot of public libraries do, they do take patron requests. And if there's a need for the sports books and that collection, a lot of times the library will do their best to try to get those books into the collection. And what's great about it nowadays with the internet is that there's interlibrary loan nationwide. If there's a book in Philadelphia or New Jersey or wherever, and I want that book, they can get that book, put in delivery for me. And I have access to a lot of things as a researcher, and you do too, as a sports historian, access to a lot of different materials. But the short answer is, hey, take a look on Amazon, check it out, read the reviews that are on there. I had several scholars and athletes write reviews for me. I'm very grateful for that. And those appear on the Amazon webpage as well.
Very interesting. Well said. And got a little bit of secret from the librarians too. So we got that little secret too. So so folks, we can get more books that way. That's always a good thing.
Oh yeah.
Now, Dan, okay, if let's say that somebody just was on a desert island for a couple of years and they came back to society and they meet you and you get like a couple minutes to tell them about your book, and you can point to one post that you have in the book. What would you choose? And maybe you could tell us, treat us like that guy coming off the island.
Oh boy. Oh, there's so many. It's hard to choose.
What represents your book the most that would get to catch that person's interest?
Well, I think it's just, this book covers high school, college, pro, and the Olympics. I mean, California has hosted the Olympics more than any other state. We've hosted the Winter Olympics, Squaw Valley, 1960. We've hosted the Summer Olympics, 1932 in Los Angeles, right? Mm-hmm. 1984 in Los Angeles. And guess what? The 2028 Olympic Games are going to come back to Los Angeles. We're going to have it for like the third time. So wow. just the Olympic history alone is kind of crazy. But the first Olympic Village was built in time for the 1932 Olympics. So I think the Olympic related stuff is very important because it showed America to the world. And, as more and more women athletes have finally been given the opportunity to have a career in sports and to train and have the resources. And now you're seeing so many of those great athletes make their mark. And, but yeah, I would just say, look at the Olympic history, and then that'll give you a good overview of what's happened in California. Like the X Games have been very big in California. The ESPN, who started the X Games, the alternative, mm-hmm. But also we have a California State Games for the recreational athlete here. so they can participate and compete in Olympic style sports, men and women. And guess what? I have to mention, if I'm going to mention all these women athletes, I've got to get in Billie Jean King at least at a bare minimum, because there's so many great women athletes here. But what she's been able to do for sports and for our country, it's just been amazing. But she was, born and raised in Long Beach, California, just south of Los Angeles. Got her first tennis racket. I believe that, if I remember the article correctly, I believe the cost was $9 for that maroon tennis racket. And that's how we started on the public courts of Long Beach. And, and then, of course, I mean, we've got them all in tennis, men and women. And in the Williams sisters, though Serena was born in Michigan, of course, the Williams sisters made their mark in California, growing up in Compton, California, near Los Angeles. So, I would say the Olympics. Again, it's something so special, and the whole world's watching. And you have these athletes that come out of nowhere to record personal bests. There's so much human interest behind it. It's a real special time. So that's what I would say.
Okay. All right. Hey, that's a great answer. Great answer. I mean, there are so many different things that are eye-catching in there. And I found myself, it's a fun book, and it's not a book that you have to sit down and read cover to cover, but you can. But I found myself going in, as soon as I got in there and said, "Oh, these are by dates." Of course, one thing, you go to your birthday, and my birthday was in there. I read that, and I went to some other.
Oh, that's good.
Went to some other date. You had quite a bit on my birthday. My birthday's December 1st, and you had quite a bit on there, which was interesting. So I enjoyed that, and I jumped around to some other dates, that I know as a sports historian, to see what was going on there, and I was delighted by doing it, and so it's a good read for almost a casual reader to somebody that's going to be down and serious and go cover to cover. So that's the kind of books that are really interesting. You can attract both of those. So we appreciate what you did there.
Well, thank you, because I wanted to make it the kind of a book where you could just pop in and skip around, and you don't have to read it in a progression. There's so many different stories. I mean, we got weightlifting, we've got ice skating, we've got curling. I mean, but hey, America's largest curling center, west of Fargo, North Dakota, is in Los Angeles. So, I mean,
really?
Yes, curling's a big deal.
I read the part on curling, and
it's hot. It's hot in California. Why would these people be doing winter sports? You know what I mean? But that one really caught my eye, because I'm just a lake away from the Canadian border, so we get quite a bit of growing up before cable TV. We got cable reception from Ontario, Canada down here, so we got to see curling all the time on our TV. So we're accustomed to that, along with Hockey Night in Canada. But I would not think of California as being a place of curling, and that's interesting. Curling, that's right, and ice hockey is field hockey, but the ice hockey was introduced up in San Francisco. But I mean, we've had a long history of hockey in the state of California. And we're producing more hockey players. So there you go. It doesn't make sense.
Well, but it does when you think about the climate and all the different climates that California brings to people that live there and visit. So very, very enjoyable. So Dan, really appreciate you taking this time to help tell us about your book and celebrate sports of California. And let's give the listeners one more time the title and where they can purchase the book at.
Okay, the title is California Sports Astounding, and the book is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also at my website, California Sports Astounding.com.
All right. And his name is Dan Cisco. And, everybody, let's go to one of those avenues and get his book. And because I think you're really going to enjoy it. And it's great to have in your collection, and you'll learn a lot from it, just like I did. So, Dan, thank you very much for joining us here today and telling us about great California sports.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me. Great. Enjoyed it.
Sorry, but my pitching coach just called timeout, and he's coming out to the mound. I think I'm going to get yanked for a reliever. We'll see you back tomorrow for some more great sports history on Sports Jersey Dispatch Podcast. We invite you to check out our websites, jerseydispatch.com and pigskindispatch.com. Not only see the daily sports history, but to experience the preservation of great events and people that play the games. Find us on Pigskin Dispatch. It's also on social media outlets of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all your daily sports history. Pigskin Dispatch is happy to be associated with the Sports History Network, the sports headquarters of yesteryear, found at sportshistorynetwork.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.